On the night of March 14th, Daniel Hargrove turned on his camera. He wasn't filming for anyone else. There was no audience, no plan to upload anything. He said he needed proof because something inside his home didn't make sense. In the recording, his voice stays calm, controlled, like someone trying not to panic. But there are moments where he stops talking completely, like he's listening. Listening to something he never names. Over the next few hours, Daniel documents everything. The sounds in the walls, the movement in empty rooms, the feeling that something is getting closer. He never leaves the house. And by morning, Daniel Hargrove was gone. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry, no explanation. Police recovered the camera. They reviewed the footage. But whatever they found on it was never fully released to the public. Only fragments were logged, brief descriptions, missing sections, and one detail investigators refused to clarify. Because according to the official report, Daniel was not alone in that house. And parts of that recording still exist. The house sits at the edge of a quiet residential stretch, just far enough from the center of town that things begin to thin out. Fewer houses, wider gaps between them, longer pauses between passing cars. At night, the area settles quickly. By 10 p.m., most lights are already off. What remains is a still kind of silence. Not complete silence, but the kind filled with small, distant sounds. A dog barking somewhere far down the road. A generator humming behind a neighboring building. The faint buzz of streetlights, struggling to stay on. The air itself feels unmoving, heavy, like it's holding on to the heat from earlier in the day. The road leading to Daniel's house isn't busy. It's a narrow strip of asphalt, lined with low fences and modest homes, most of them single-story. Streetlights are spaced unevenly. Some work, some don't. So parts of the road fall into shadow, while others sit under a dull, flickering glow. There are no shops nearby, no late-night movement, no reason for anyone to be outside. Just houses and the quiet routines inside them. Daniel Hargrove lived in one of the last houses on that stretch. A small, simple building set slightly back from the road. The exterior shows nothing unusual. Plain walls, a single front door, 2 windows facing the street. A narrow walkway leads up to the entrance, bordered by a patch of dry grass. Inside, the layout is familiar. A living room just beyond the door. A short hallway connecting the bedroom, a small kitchen, and a bathroom. No hidden spaces, no extensions, nothing complex. Everything about the house feels standard, expected. The kind of place you don't think twice about. Daniel had been living there alone for just over a year. He worked remotely, a job that kept him indoors most of the time. Data entry, basic system monitoring. Quiet work that didn't require much interaction. Neighbors knew of him, but not much more than that. He kept to himself. No regular visitors, no loud activity, no disruptions. He followed a routine. Wake up, log in, work, eat, sleep. On weekends, he stayed in. Sometimes the light in his living room would stay on late into the night. But nothing about that stood out. There were no reports of unusual behavior. No history of anxiety, no signs of distress. He wasn't known to exaggerate or imagine things. If anything, Daniel was described as practical, measured. The kind of person who notices details, but doesn't jump to conclusions. And inside that house, everything reflected that same sense of order. Furniture placed simply, nothing out of position. No clutter, no signs of neglect. A space that felt controlled, predictable. The kind of environment where nothing should feel out of place. And on most nights, it didn't. The same quiet routine. The same still air. The same distant sounds fading in and out. Nothing unusual. Nothing that would draw attention. Nothing that would make someone stop and listen. But on the night Daniel turned on his camera, if he worked late the night before. He didn't experiment with meals. He didn't need to. Everything was simple, repeatable, efficient. By 7 o'clock, his system was already running. A laptop open on the same table, in the same position, every day. No decorations, no distractions. Just a screen, a chair, and hours of quiet work. From outside, nothing about his day stood out. No calls, no meetings loud enough to carry through the walls. Just stillness, broken occasionally by the soft tapping of keys. In the afternoon, he took short breaks. Always inside the house. Sometimes he stood near the window, looking out at the road. Not watching anything in particular, I'm just looking. Cars passed occasionally. Sometimes a motorcycle. But most of the time, nothing moved. And Daniel seemed comfortable with that. Evening followed the same pattern. Work ended, laptop closed, lights adjusted. The living room became the only space in use. A single bulb overhead, dim enough to soften the room, but not dark. He'd sit down, usually in the same position. Television on volume low. Sometimes he watched, sometimes he didn't. His phone stayed in his hand, scrolling, pausing, then going still for long stretches. There are moments in the recovered footage where nothing changes for minutes at a time. No movement, no sound beyond the television. Just Daniel, sitting quietly, existing inside the routine. And then, around the same time every night, the small details begin. The ones that never changed. The bedroom door, for example. It never closed cleanly. Every night, when he pushed it shut, it would settle, then release slightly. A soft wooden shift. A quiet creak. Always the same tone. Always the same timing. It happens in several recordings. Daniel notices it once, early on. He even mentions it. That door again. A brief pause, and then a small laugh. Nothing more. It becomes part of the background. Another predictable sound. The power behaved the same way. Not a full outage, just slight fluctuations. Lights dimming for a second, then returning. The fan slowing, then picking back up. It never lasted long. And it never surprised him. In one clip, he barely looks up. Just glances at the ceiling, then back to his phone. As if it's already expected. Outside, the same patterns repeat. A man passes by most nights. Always around the same hour. Walking, unhurried, never stopping. He doesn't look toward the house. He doesn't interact with anything. He just passes, then disappears into the darker part of the road. This happens often enough, issue that Daniel stops noticing. The world around him stays consistent. Predictable. Safe. And Daniel reflects that same consistency. He isn't reactive. He doesn't jump at small noises. He doesn't question normal things. If something has an explanation, he accepts it. And if it doesn't, he waits. In one recording, he speaks directly to the camera. Probably just the wiring again. His tone is calm, almost casual. No tension, no uncertainty. Just a quiet assumption that everything has a reason, that nothing is out of place. And the camera itself, Ahmed, was never unusual. Daniel had been recording parts of his nights for weeks, sometimes longer. The reason isn't clearly stated, but in earlier clips, it feels practical. Security, maybe. Or just something to pass the time. The camera placement changes slightly, but it always faces the same areas. The living room, the hallway, occasionally the front door. The recordings are uneventful. Hours of stillness. Lights turning off. Doors closing. Daniel moving from one room to another, then disappearing from view. Nothing stands out. No sudden movements. No unexplained sounds. No interruptions. Even when reviewed later, the footage remains exactly what it appears to be. Ordinary. And that's what makes the final recording different. Because everything about Daniel's life, up until that night, followed a pattern, a rhythm, a system that never broke. The same sound, the same movements, the same quiet routine, repeating without any change. Until something inside that pattern didn't repeat. And Daniel noticed. The first change doesn't interrupt anything. It doesn't break the routine or draw immediate attention. It happens quietly, inside the same pattern Daniel is used to. In the recording, the timestamp reads 11:42 p.m. The living room is lit the same way it always is. Television on in volume low, Daniel seated in his usual position. There's no movement for a while. Just the soft flicker of light across the walls, and the steady hum of the fan overhead. And then, a sound. Faint. Short. Easy to miss. A single tap. It doesn't echo. It doesn't repeat. It just happens. Daniel doesn't react immediately. He continues scrolling on his phone. Posture unchanged. A few seconds pass. Then he pauses. Not suddenly. Just a slight stillness. His head lifts just enough to listen. The room stays the same. No follow-up sound, no movement. Nothing that confirms what he heard. He looks toward the hallway. Waits. Then exhales quietly, almost like a small acknowledgement. Probably the pipes. His voice is low, steady, not concerned. He sets the phone down for a moment, listening again. Nothing. The silence returns to what it was before. And just like that, the moment ends. He picks up the phone again. The routine continues. The next night, the pattern repeats. Same time of evening. Same position. Same quiet environment. The timestamp moves past 11:40. And again, the house is still. But this time, the sound returns. Slightly different. Not louder, but longer. A soft, dragging tap. Like something making brief, eye contact. Then stopping. Daniel hears it immediately. His head turns faster this time, but not sharply. Just enough to confirm direction. The hallway again. He doesn't speak right away. He listens. There's a short pause, then another sound. Quieter than the first, but closer together. Tap, then nothing. He leans back slightly in his chair. Eyes fixed on the same point. No tension, no alarm. Just focus. Probably a rat. A simple explanation. Delivered without hesitation. He stands up. Not urgently, just out of mild curiosity. The camera captures him moving toward the hallway. His steps are slow, controlled, the same pace he always moves. He reaches the entrance, stops for a moment, then looks down the corridor. Nothing appears to be different. The bedroom door is slightly open. The kitchen light, eye is off. The rest of the hallway is dim, but unchanged. He doesn't go further. He just stands there, listening. No additional sound follows. After a few seconds, he nods slightly to himself, as if the explanation holds. He turns back, returns to his seat, and the moment passes again. But later in that same recording, something small shifts. It's not immediate. It doesn't happen while he's watching. It's only visible when the footage is reviewed. The camera remains fixed on the living room. Daniel is seated, facing away slightly. The hallway is still visible in the background. The bedroom door, which had been slightly open, moves. Not fully. Not enough to make a sound. Just a subtle change in position. A few inches, maybe less. From partially open to nearly closed. There's no visible, i.e. cause. No airflow, no passing movement. And Daniel doesn't notice. He doesn't turn around. He doesn't react. The shift happens quietly, behind him, without acknowledgement. And the recording continues as if nothing changed. The next night, the pattern tightens. The same hour approaches. The same stillness fills the room. Daniel is already looking toward the hallway, right before anything happens. Not out of fear, but expectation. He's waiting. And right on time, the sound returns. This time, clearer. A soft, deliberate tap, followed by a second, slightly offset. Tap, tap. Not random. Not scattered. Spaced evenly. Daniel doesn't speak right away. He just watches, listening carefully. No sudden movement, no visible concern. Just quiet attention. After a moment, he exhales. A small shift, in posture. Yeah, definitely something in the wall. Again, a conclusion. Simple, reasonable. He stands but doesn't move toward the hallway this time. He just adjusts his position, leaning slightly to listen better. The sound doesn't come again. And slowly, the room settles back into silence. But there's another detail. Small, easy to overlook. On the table beside him, there's a cup. It appears in earlier footage, placed near the edge, always in the same spot. But in this recording, it's closer to the center. Not far. Just enough to feel slightly off. There's no moment where it's moved. No contact, no visible cause. And Daniel doesn't acknowledge it. He doesn't look at it or question it. Because to him, nothing has changed. The sounds have explanations. The environment is familiar. The routine is intact, and whatever is happening still fits inside that routine. At least for now. The change doesn't arrive all at once. It builds quietly, inside the same routine Daniel has followed every night. The time stays consistent. Just before midnight. Sometimes 11:42. Sometimes a few minutes later. But always within the same narrow window. And the location doesn't change either. The hallway. Somewhere beyond the living room, just out of direct view. In the next recording, Daniel is already prepared. The camera is positioned more deliberately now. Not angled loosely, but centered, steady, fixed on the hallway entrance. He checks it once, adjusts slightly, then sits. The television is off this time. The room is quieter than before. No background noise, no distraction. Just Daniel, waiting. The timestamp? Yeah, moves slowly. 11:39, 11:41. He doesn't touch his phone. He doesn't shift in his seat. He's listening. And then, right on time, the sound returns. Tap. A pause. Then another. Tap, tap. Clearer than before. Not louder, but defined. Like something making contact with a solid surface. With intention. Daniel doesn't speak. He just watches the hallway, counting the space between each sound. The pattern holds for a few seconds, then stops. The silence that follows feels longer than it should. But Daniel doesn't move. Not immediately. After a moment, he leans forward slightly. Eyes still fixed on the same point, as if expecting something else to follow. But nothing does. The recording continues for another hour. No additional sounds. No visible changes. Just stillness. Later, that same footage is reviewed, and that's when the first difference appears. The sound, captured on the recording, is not the same as what Daniel heard in real time. In the playback, it's sharper, closer. The taps carry more weight, more presence. Each one lands with a clarity that wasn't there before. Daniel pauses the video, rewinds, plays it again. He leans closer to the screen, listening carefully, comparing. That's louder than I remember. His voice is quiet, controlled, but more focused than before. He replays the sequence multiple times. Each time, the same result. The sound isn't distant. It isn't muted. It's defined, as if it originated closer to the camera than the hallway itself. He doesn't reach a conclusion. He just watches. The next night, the process repeats. But with small changes. The camera is set earlier. The room is darker. The only light now comes from the hallway, faint and indirect. Daniel sits again, posture more rigid. No television, no phone. Just waiting. The timestamp passes 11:40. And then, the sound. This time, it doesn't start with a single tap. It begins with a soft, dragging contact. A brief shift, followed by 2 taps. Tap, tap. The spacing is tighter now. The sequence shorter, more controlled. Daniel tilts his head slightly. Still calm, but more alert. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He just listens, counting the rhythm. And then it stops again. But something else changes. When the footage is reviewed later, there's a delay. Small but consistent. In the recording, the sound occurs. Then, less than a second later, a second version of the same sound follows. Fainter, slightly distorted, but clearly separate. Tap, tap, not an echo. The timing is wrong. The spacing too precise. Daniel notices it immediately. He pauses the video, rewinds, plays it again. The delay repeats, exactly the same. Every time. He leans closer, listening carefully, isolating the audio. His expression doesn't change much, but the focus is sharper now. That shouldn't... He stops mid-sentence, doesn't finish the thought, just rewinds again. The pattern holds. The sound followed by itself. Out of sync. The next few nights, the progression continues. The timing stays consistent. The location, unchanged. But the distance begins to shift. In earlier recordings, the sound feels contained, behind the hallway. Further back, deeper inside, the house. But now, it's closer. Subtly, but noticeably. The taps carry less distance. The space between Daniel and the source feels reduced. He doesn't say this directly, but his behavior reflects it. He begins adjusting the camera more often. Small movements, slight angle changes, trying to capture more of the hallway. He leaves the recordings running longer, past midnight, into early morning. Sometimes he reviews them immediately. Other time, he waits. But each time, he watches more closely. Frame by frame. Listening for differences. Tracking the pattern. And then, one night, there's something else. It doesn't involve sound. It doesn't repeat. And it's easy to miss. In the recording, Daniel is seated, facing forward. The hallway behind him, dimly lit. The usual stillness. No movement. The timestamp approaches 11:44. The sound occurs as expected. Tap, tap. Daniel reacts the same way. Slight shift. Focused attention. But at the very edge of the frame, near the hallway entrance, there's a change. A brief, partial movement. Not clear enough to define. Not large enough to draw immediate attention. Just a subtle shift in the darkness. As if something passed just outside the visible area. It lasts less than a second. Daniel doesn't notice it. He doesn't turn. He remains focused on the sound. But later, during playback, he sees it. The footage pauses. Rewinds. Plays again. He leans forward, closer than before. The movement repeats, exactly the same. Always at the edge. Never fully visible. Just enough to suggest presence without form. Daniel doesn't speak for, several seconds. Not even to himself. He watches the moment again, and again. Slowing it down. Frame by frame. The shape doesn't resolve. It doesn't become clearer. It remains incomplete. He exhales quietly. A controlled breath. Probably just lighting. The explanation comes now, but slower this time. Less certain. He lets the footage continue. But his posture doesn't relax. And over the next few nights, that same edge of the frame becomes the focus. Daniel adjusts the camera slightly, trying to bring more of the hallway into view. Not dramatically, just small corrections. Each night, a little closer. The sounds continue. The timing remains precise. The delay in the recording persists. And the distance continues to close. Daniel doesn't stop recording. He doesn't leave the house. He doesn't call anyone. He stays within the same routine, but now the routine has changed. The waiting is intentional. The silence is observed. And every night, just before midnight, he's already looking toward the hallway. Before the sound even begins. The final recording begins the same way as the others. Same room. Same position. Same quiet. But Daniel doesn't sit immediately. He stands in front of the camera for a moment, adjusting it with both hands. The frame is tighter now. The hallway is still visible, but less of it. More of the room. More of him. He steps back slowly, then looks directly into the lens. For the first time, he speaks without distraction. It's not in the hallway anymore. A short pause. He listens, briefly, then continues. It's closer than that. His voice is, steady. No panic, no rush. Just a statement, delivered as plainly as everything else. He sits down, but not fully relaxed. His posture is upright. Still, the television is off. The lights are dimmer than usual. And the silence lasts longer. The timestamp moves forward. 11:41. 11:43. No sound yet. Daniel doesn't move. He's not waiting for a noise anymore. He's listening for something else. The room remains unchanged. No movement, no shift in light, no visible difference. And then, a sound. But not from the hallway. From behind him. Soft. Close. A single contact. Not a tap this time. More controlled. Like something making brief contact with a surface inside the room. Daniel doesn't react immediately. He freezes, just slightly. His eyes shift, not his head. He listens. Again. Nothing follows. The silence returns, but it feels different now. He exhales, slowly. Then, carefully, he turns. Not quickly. Not suddenly. Just a gradual movement, as if he already knows where to look. The camera captures only part of the motion. His shoulder, then his profile. Then, the space behind him. There's nothing obvious. No clear figure. No defined shape. Just the same room, the same dim light, the same stillness. Daniel keeps looking, longer than before, as if trying to confirm something, rather than discover it. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move closer. He just watches. Then he turns back, slowly, facing the camera again. His expression hasn't changed much, but something in his focus has. More precise. More certain. He leans forward slightly. And for a moment, he doesn't say anything. Just breath, steady, controlled. Then, it's been here. A pause. He glances behind him again. Briefly, then back to the camera. Not moving, just there. His voice lowers slightly. Not from fear, but from concentration. Like he's choosing each word carefully. The recording continues. The silence stretches longer than before. Minutes pass without sound. But Daniel doesn't relax. He keeps his position. Eyes shifting occasionally. Listening. And then, later in the footage, the discovery becomes clear. Not during the recording, but during playback. Daniel sits at his desk, reviewing the footage from earlier that night. The screen reflects faintly in his eyes. He pauses the video, rewinds, then plays it again. There's a moment just before the sound behind him. A fraction of a second, where something appears. Not fully formed, not centered, just at the edge of the frame, behind where he's sitting. A darker shape against the dim background. It doesn't move into the room. It doesn't approach. It's already there. Standing within the same space, before the sound occurs. Daniel freezes the frame, leans closer, watches it again. The sequence repeats. Every time, the same. The shape appears. Then the sound follows. Not the other way around. He rewinds further. Checks the previous nights. The same pattern begins to surface. Faint, incomplete, but consistent. Each recording. Each night. Something present. Before any sound is heard. Before any reaction. Before Daniel ever looks. He stops the footage. The room around him is silent. He doesn't speak for a long time. Just sits, processing, aligning the sequence. And when he finally looks back at the screen, he understands. And when he finally looked, he realized it had been standing there every single night. The recording does not end with movement. There is no final statement, no clear conclusion. It simply stops. The last frame holds for several seconds. Daniel is still seated, facing the screen, the room unchanged. Then the footage cuts. No transition. No visible cause. Just an abrupt end. The next morning, the routine breaks for the first time. Daniel does not log in. No system activity. No response to scheduled tasks. At first, but it isn't immediately concerning. Short absences happen. Delays, missed check-ins. But by midday, the silence continues. Calls are placed. No. I answer. Messages are sent? No reply. The pattern doesn't correct itself. By evening, someone notices the difference. A colleague familiar enough with his routine to recognize the absence. The kind of absence that doesn't fit. A call is made again. Still nothing. And eventually, someone goes to the house. The road is the same. Quiet, unchanged. The neighboring houses show no activity out of the ordinary. No signs of disturbance. No indication that anything has happened. The exterior of Daniel's house appears exactly as it always did. Door closed. Windows intact. No damage, no forced entry. Nothing out of place. When the doors opened, the interior matches the outside. Everything is where it should be. The living room, undisturbed. The chair, in position. The table, unchanged. No signs of struggle. No overturned furniture. No broken objects. The hallway, empty. The bedroom, unaltered. Nothing missing. Nothing displaced. Just the same environment preserved exactly as it was. But Daniel is not there. No indication of where he went. No evidence suggesting how he left. Just absence. Authorities are contacted. The house is processed. Standard procedure. Entry points checked. Surfaces examined. Nothing unusual is recorded. No fingerprints beyond what would be expected. No signs of intrusion. No physical evidence indicating another presence. The camera is recovered. Placed exactly where it had been during the recording. Powered, but no longer active. The footage is reviewed. Segment by segment. Hour by hour. But the final recording is incomplete. Sections are missing. Gaps appear in the timeline. Moments that should be there aren't. No clear reason is given for the loss. Only that the file is not intact. What remains is cataloged, logged, described, but not released in full. An official statement follows. Brief, controlled. No detailed explanation. No confirmation of what appears in the footage. Only that the investigation found no evidence of external involvement. And that Daniel Hargrove remains unaccounted for. The case stays open, but inactive. No suspects. No leads. No conclusion. And within the internal review, there is one detail, noted quietly. Not included in the official summary. Not expanded upon. Just recorded and left without comment. One of the officers assigned to review the footage stopped. Partway through. Declined to continue. No formal explanation is attached. No incident report. Just a request to be removed from further analysis. The rest of the footage remains restricted. Stored, but not publicly available. And the house returns to silence. The same layout. The same stillness. The same quiet environment. Unchanged. As if nothing ever happened. Except for the absence. The house is still there. Same position at the edge of the road. Same walls, same windows, unchanged. From the outside, like nothing suggests anything ever happened. Over time, it has been occupied again. New tenants, short stays. People moving in, then leaving. Not immediately. Not suddenly. But never for long. No formal complaints. No official reports. Just a pattern of brief occupancy, followed by quiet departures. The interior remains the same. The layout unchanged. The room's intact. Everything exactly where it should be. The camera is no longer there. Removed during the investigation, stored along with the footage. What remains of that footage is incomplete. Fragments, brief segments, partial, logs. Small portions that were documented, then restricted. The full recording was never released. No official explanation was given for the missing sections. No clarification on what was seen. Only that parts of it exist. And among those who have reviewed the available fragments, there is no agreement. No consistent description. No shared conclusion. Only one detail, repeated quietly, without elaboration. That the sequence does not begin where it should. That something appears before it is expected to. And that the recording does not capture the beginning. To this day, no one has explained what Daniel captured that night. But those who have seen parts of it say the most disturbing thing was not what appeared in the room. It was how long it had already been there.